This is update for July 22, 2022, day 149 of the war, end of the date update. So first of all, let's start with general discussion, as we always do. Now we're going to focus a little bit more on the Ukrainian economy. So first news is, which actually happened yesterday, but it was really long, and honestly I was really tired and I forgot to mention. Ukrainian government devalued Ukrainian currency by 25%. In reality, it actually was 30%. So it went from 29 to effectively 39 Ukrainian hryvnias for one US dollar. And just for those who not very familiar with this system in Ukraine, Ukraine is a dollar country, not really euro country. So here the dollar is king, and everybody saves in used to be most people were sort of switching to Ukrainian local currency when it was more or less stable, and it was it was a shift towards more like local currency. Now, because of the situation with the devaluation, and so the switch is obviously back to US dollar, which was in the past also the main sort of really currency, because Ukrainian hryvnia turns into we couldn't even call it currency at this point. It's just a piece of paper with some information on it. And so again, we'll discuss it probably in the future in more detail, but this is absolutely disastrous policy of Ukrainian government and central bank. They both sort of worse each other, and the way it's done is actually, so the central bank actually set the fixed exchange rate, which never works, actually destroys the economy tremendously. At the beginning of the war, at I think $29 Ukrainian hryvnias for $1. Now what they did is actually they set again fixed exchange rate at 36.5 for $1, but the real rate in the market, let's say 39 right now. So again, they're creating this fixed rate which doesn't work, and then they're gonna devalue again later, right? So but what it does, it creates huge disruptive waves through the economy, and we mentioned before that as a result, effectively any manufacturing activity is really not possible. You're gonna just be bankrupt in a pretty short order. But what this does, it also destroys the trade, the commerce, right? So because the commerce is the sort of the most simple form of business, how you can earn money, and even that is getting destroyed. So we just want to explain how deeply flawed these actions are, and they really undermine the economy and country's ability to continue to defend itself. So in many ways, they are more dangerous to the country at this moment than the Russian invasion. And the problem is that this is all very extremely abstract. So like, let's say 98% of population doesn't really understand what's happening, why it's happening, and even who to blame. So that's why it's being done, because majority doesn't understand any of this. And so so that's really doesn't, but eventually it leads to this riots and uncontrolled situation, because people unhappy, they don't want to where to put the blame, so they're just rioting, right? So that's how it all turns out. We're not saying Ukrainians are going to riot anytime soon, but we're just saying that this is really not helping Ukraine from any perspective, and not a result of that. Well, that was one piece of information. Then there is super fresh piece of information, which is probably 5 or 6 hours old, is that Fitch, which is one of the three major ratings agencies, downgraded Ukraine to C. So this is C here. Oops. Yep. So it works now. So this is where they downgraded. So as you can see, it's essentially pre-default situation, and they clearly stated that once the restructuring with the sovereign creditors will be settled, then it's going to be essentially a selective default, or let's call it orderly default in terms of dealing with international creditors. And maybe not, that's, as we discussed, it's more like sovereign deal is done, which is a Paris Club, but there is also private foreign creditors, which is there is no news that the deal is done there. So it could be, partially sort of orderly default, partially disorderly default, or maybe it will be all orderly default. We don't know, but it's very clear that essentially there is recognition by the international financial community that this is default, and we're pretty sure that Moody's and S&P will follow the suit, because they all kind of go sort of in as a herd, let's put this way, because the situation is obviously very clear cut. There's no doubt. In many ways, this is inevitable. Because we discussed the country had too much debt because of the debt binge over the past, let's say, 15, 16 years. Every government that was in power obviously borrowed as much as they could to basically waste that money. There was nothing to show for that money, let's put this way, in terms of productive capacity. Anything, it was just basically wasted, used on the toilet, essentially, if you use like very kind of primitive way to say it, what's going on there. So at the same time, let's actually switch to Russian central bank. They reduced their key rate from 9.5 to 8%. So what they are doing right now, they hiked the rate at the beginning of the war. I think it was like as high as somewhere between 15 and 20%. Now, what it also does, it suffocates Russian economy. And so then now they're trying to reduce the rate to kind of like give the sort of fresh air, because effectively Russian economy was hit by sanctions as one sort of source, and then it was hit by this hike in the rates, right? Because it's very sort of like repressive rates. The reason it was done by Russian central bank is to keep Russian ruble from really depreciating, from falling to 200. And so that's why we said it's all artificial, sort of painting the picture. When you see ruble trading between 50 to 60 US dollars, it's just result of you jack the interest rates, and that's a result. You can jack them up to, let's say, 50%, and you probably will see 1 ruble for $1. So and the economy cannot sort of sustain this. No business can sustain high rates like such as 15, 20, normal business, let's put this way. Not there are all kind of illegal businesses, but sort of like legal normal business, 15, 20%, it's a death for any business. So now the head of the central bank in Russia is reducing the rates to kind of like allow their sort of the blood to flow through the economy and just kind of revive. Because you saw the numbers we presented on Russian industry, it's essentially dying, and pretty quickly. So as a result, their situation is going to be, this actually can lead to down the road to riots and so on in Russia. So they're taking action to kind of avoid that situation. And that's why we're mentioning frequently, not only for this reason, but for many others, that both countries are heading towards their 1917 moments. So now let's actually switch to another topic. It's regarding the food, and specifically grain. So there was agreement reached in Turkey, in Istanbul, that both Russia and Ukraine can essentially freely export grain from their ports. So the reason what was going on is, since Russia was sanctioned, it was blocked. So then it decided, okay, we're going to block Ukraine as well. So essentially, this agreement is kind of like probably you can say win-win for both sides, where Russia got what they wanted, that they can freely export grain from Russia, and then they allow Ukraine to export grain from Ukraine, obviously. So, and then probably related to this, there was news that Lithuania drops all of those restrictions on Russia. that it implemented. So that's probably part of the bigger deal. We don't have obviously 100% speculate sort of information. It's more speculative, but it does look so that there was some kind of larger deal than beyond what was just signed sort of for the public in Istanbul, where there was apparently agreement like, okay, we're not blocking you, you're not blocking us, essentially. For Ukraine, it's very important because simply country does not effectively industry is dead, so agriculture is the most sort of call it also primitive way to earn money, but it's kind of guaranteed. And so because Ukrainian government and the whole economy is sort of suffering from lack of any value add. So this at least creates some stream of revenue that's more or less reliable for Ukrainian government. So that's quick update on this sort of economy slash and one more thing about this grain situation. So as a result, if you follow the markets, you can see that the prices for agricultural commodities dropped significantly today as a result of that agreement. So as so all in, you probably, well, not immediately, but you may see some uh, you know reduction in the inflation in the world. So because now there is free flow of agricultural commodities, and also in terms of crude oil, that's being done through the interest rate hikes of Federal Reserve, and then also the European Central Bank is following the suit, so they're also increasing rates there. So that will basically cut off some of the demand, destroy some of the demand, and so as you can see, that the oil is kind of like not trading more closer to $100 as opposed to like 120 that it used to. So you see that this inflationary pressures are basically, let's call it, arrested, and to extent subsiding. It's not clear if this is continued this way, but at least sort of from a concern of the West, where there was big concern of the inflation is going out of control. At least the situation has been stabilized. It's not under perfect control or anything, but it's not sort of developing more in a negative direction as a whole. Now let's move to the our front line. As we always do, we're gonna do the walk through the in a clockwise fashion, starting from the very north. Uh, except I forgot to mention about the HIMARS situation. Didn't look there were any new actually attacks at the bridge in Kherson and the road over the dam near Nova Kakhovka. So we're not sure what's going on there, but it seems like it was kind of like a day off, sort of, for the attacks. Now let's actually look what's going on at the very north along the state border. Situation more or less the same. We would say even that the intensity somewhat subsided of the exchange of sort of all kind of fires. So things probably a little bit more quieter here. Now let's move to Kharkiv. Let's see what's going on east of Kharkiv. Things here totally, call it, I would say, positional, probably the best word. No large scale attacks. There were never large scale attacks, but not even sort of, call it, medium scale or even sort of company size attacks. So it's just more like sort of reconnaissance actions, but it's totally quiet here. And again, I guess quiet is not probably proper word for using here. Now let's move south. Let's see what's going on at Izyum bridgehead. Things again here similar way to east of Kharkiv. There were no even sort of medium-sized attack, some probing action around Bohorodechne, in this area around Dolina, Krasnopila, but this is typical, but they are not even anything sort of, it's just literally reconnaissance actions. There is not even anything worth mentioning here. Now let's move let's move to east and let's see what's going on at the North Donbass front line. And actually, by the way, I forgot to mention there was actually interesting, and this is actually relevant for this area. We're going to talk about Lysychansk. So this is a town that was captured by Russian troops. It's about, I think the pre-war population was around 100,000, plus minus maybe 90, somewhere in that ballpark. And by the way, the Severodonetsk is kind of the same. They kind of like in many ways twin cities. And then the Rubizhne was about like 60,000. So the whole area probably close to 300,000 people in population, with sort of the small villages nearby and so on. But anyways, let's just go back to Lysychansk. So there was interesting observations from the Russian side, from the Russian source of the person who is on the front line, sort of more like, hardcore sort of, I'd say, hawk in terms of continuing the war. And so he wrote that this I don't know if it's town or city, whatever you call it, is extremely hostile. That was his sort of impression, and what he said that there is essentially all of the youth was pro-Ukrainian, and they left the town, left the city once the Russian troops sort of captured it. And what he's explaining the situation in this town is that their relatives, was staying there, and they informing Ukrainian troops of everything what's going on. So there is a lot of like a command action, and he says that there is a lot of attacks at night on Russian, patrols and so on. So, and obviously there are killed sort of soldiers, Russian soldiers, and things like that. And not only that, but it's sort of like kind of like psychological warfare, where these people, they write things like such as Slava Ukraini on the walls and things like that. So this actually gives us, this is first time we seeing, let's say objective opinion of the situation on the captured territories, right? Because before it's more coming from, let's say, Ukrainian propaganda, so you kind of want to take it with a grain of salt, versus this one, you cannot sort of, it's pretty objective assessment of the situation, and things probably happening more or less similar in other areas. Unfortunately, we cannot sort of extrapolate because it's just one city, but nevertheless, this kind of gives us a glimpse into life on captured territories. And by the way, another note on all of this is that if the infrastructure is not repaired in these towns, and including Mariupol, which is going to be much bigger problem if it's not repaired before the sort of cold season, then it's probably gonna get sort of totally destroyed by the winter, by the cold, because there could be water in the pipes and everything, so it's just gonna blow up everything. And this all cities, towns are gonna be pretty uninhabitable, or the cost to repair them is gonna be in stratosphere, because all of the infrastructure is gonna, you basically need to rebuild infrastructure totally from scratch in all of these places. And the problem is that it's not just sort of greenfield project, it's a sort of brownfield project where we first need to remove existing one which is destroyed, which is going to be not very easy, and then put new one. So it's going to be extremely big problem for the reconstruction, and we're pretty sure that Russian military administration is not going to be repairing these places before the winter season starts, and they don't even really have much time actually. There were actually very interesting comments from the one of the high-ranking Russian officials. So how which kind of explains you how they see sort of solving the problem of fixing infrastructure and everything. They just like, he said like, oh, we're gonna bring workers from North Korea. We're gonna negotiate with North Korea, and in exchange for food, we're gonna bring those workers, and they're just gonna work on these territories. We don't think this is gonna happen, but this is just kind of explains your level of, I would say, insanity that's out there, and level of thinking of probably 19th century type of thinking. But this is just sorry for the kind of like little kind of switch in different direction, but they just kind of give you impression of what's going on the captured territories. Now let's actually kind of go through the front line. So as you can see, there was quite a bit of Russian attacks along the this front line, and even in the south as well, in the southern section of this front line. So all typical places. This Ivano-Darivka, Verkhnyo-Kamensk. For some reason, there were no attacks towards this village Grigorivka here. And then obviously the other area is Russian troops are really trying to get to the road here and to capture Soledar here, which is essentially the only and largest supplier of salt for entire Ukraine. And it stopped at this point, this mine, and so there was shortages of salt in Ukraine as well. About 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, something like that. The Russian troops here, they're trying to capture fully this village Pokrovska. We mentioned they captured southern portion of it, so the fighting is still going on in this village. We don't know sort of exactly where each side is at this point. We just know that the fighting is still going on in the village. Now let's move a little bit south in the same section. So you can see here again, there were attacks towards this power plant, which is happening essentially every day at this point. And then also attacks from this salient towards this small town Novoluhansk without much success. Everything kind of stayed the same. Now let's jump quickly to situation west of Donetsk. Here, Russian troops slightly changed the tactics. It's still kind of essentially the same, but now they're trying to kind of create pincers to encircle Avdiyivka. So they're attacking from this northeastern direction, as they always do. But then they're trying also attack from, I don't know, call it from the southern area. This is the area around the Donetsk International Airport. So they're attacking there. So I mean, you can. It's very simple to you can probably see that they're trying to kind of go here, then go here, and create sort of threat of encirclement and forced withdrawal of Ukrainian troops here. Pretty straightforward tactic. Now let's move to Zaporizhia front line. It's quiet. By quiet, we mean it's just positional fighting. Nothing really is going on at large, like nothing really big happening here. Now let's actually move to Kherson bridgehead, because things here looks like heating up. And this is probably what the Ukrainian Minister of Defense said, that they want to liberate south of Ukraine, specifically Kherson region and Zaporizhia region. That's their focus. So what we see is actually Russian side is actually preemptively trying to destroy this bridgehead that we mentioned about. It's actually 2 or 3 villages along the river here in Hulets, that's the river. So they launched again attacks in 2 places in attempt to obviously destroy the Ukrainian bridgeheads, but they didn't have success here. Again, as we mentioned, there were no, or at least we're not aware of any new attacks towards the bridges to sort of finish this bridge, main bridge, Antonivsky bridge near Kherson, and then to damage further the road over the dam here. Also, there were some, call it rumors or information, that here up in the north, Ukrainian forces encircled up to like 1,000 Russian troops in the village. We believe this is false information by Ukrainian propaganda. First of all, you would never have 1,000 sort of troops or soldiers in a small village. And we explained why many times, but we're just going to explain more. Is because, first of all, Russian command and Russian side and Ukrainian side, none of them have enough troops to man fully the front line, especially here in the south, where it's really long and there is essentially it's relatively sparsely populated. There is not many buildings, there's not many villages, and it's just sort of plain like a table, more or less, not perfectly, but you just to simplify it, think about like a flat table with just the grassy sort of vegetation and like grain fields, essentially like sunflower fields and so on. So this whole area is essentially manned by small, like small kind of strongholds, and they would not be more than let's say platoon in size, maybe two platoons. Rarely, like really like relatively larger places would probably have a company in there. So this is, even from the sort of purely logical thinking, is impossible to have 1,000 soldiers in a small village. It's just, you would never do it as sort of like, if you have any kind of brain as a military commander. So this is some kind of probably propaganda machine type of thing. So we don't think that this is really happening in any case. Okay, thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.